If an ancient sky instrument still feels strangely familiar, that is because its deeper logic never disappeared. At first glance, the distance between an astrolabe and a modern dashboard seems enormous. One belongs to a world of engraved metal, celestial motion, and hand-built precision. The other belongs to glass, code, electricity, sensors, and glowing screens. One feels ancient. The other feels modern. One feels symbolic. The other feels practical. But that contrast hides something important. Because underneath the change in materials, underneath the change in speed, underneath the change in scale, both are solving the same human problem. How do you make a reality too large, too dynamic, or too complex to grasp directly into something a person can read, trust, and act through? That is the real connection. And once you see it, the ancient instrument stops looking like a dead artifact. It starts looking like an early member of a family we still live with every day. A family of interfaces. That is the story here. Not that an astrolabe is literally a digital screen. Not that ancient people somehow invented modern software. But that human beings, across very different ages, keep reaching for the same solution. Reality is larger than us. So we compress it. The heavens were too vast to hold directly. So they were turned into circles, angles, and relations a person could consult. Modern systems are too fast, too layered, too abstract to hold directly. So they are turned into panels, signals, maps, icons, gauges, and dashboards. Different tools. Same move. That is why this matters. Because once you stop looking only at the object and start looking at the pattern, the continuity becomes hard to ignore. Think about what the astrolabe-like instrument actually does. It does not give you the whole sky. It gives you a structured surface, a way to engage order without having to absorb totality, a way to convert vastness into readable relation. That is interface logic in its early form. And now think about a dashboard. A dashboard does not give you the whole machine. It does not give you the whole system. It does not give you the whole world. It gives you selected signals arranged in a form that allows action. Speed, direction, fuel, warnings, position, status. Not total reality. Usable reality. That is the family resemblance. And it is deeper than aesthetics. This is not mainly about round shapes or visual similarities, although those matter too. It is about function. The astrolabe-like object and the modern dashboard both stand between a human being and a world too large to handle raw. Both reduce uncertainty. Both privilege readable order. Both translate complexity into decision-friendly form. Both help the user move from confusion toward action. That is why the connection matters. Because it shows that the dashboard is not just a modern convenience. It is part of a much older civilizational habit. And the more you think about it, the more examples start appearing everywhere. A map is not the territory. A weather panel is not the atmosphere. A financial dashboard is not the economy. A navigation screen is not the terrain. A control panel is not the machine in its fullness. And yet people act through these things every day. Why? Because human beings do not need raw totality in order to function. They need a trusted point of contact. That is what an interface provides. A designed surface between overwhelming reality and usable action. That logic is old. Much older than modern technology. Ancient people faced a sky too large to grasp directly. Modern people face systems too large to grasp directly. But in both cases, the response is similar. Find the pattern. Select the relevant signals. organize them into form, and build a surface the user can work through. That is the lineage, and that is why this ancient instrument is so important. It reveals the skeleton of the interface world before the interface world fully arrived. That may be the most powerful part of the story, because when most people look at a modern dashboard, they see convenience. When they look at an ancient sky instrument, they see history. But when you place them side by side, something deeper comes into view. Both are technologies of orientation. Both are devices of reduction. Both are tools for negotiating complexity. Both make action possible by refusing to show everything. That last part matters more than most people realize. Every interface selects. Every interface highlights some things and suppresses others. Every interface arranges reality for use. That does not automatically make it deceptive. It makes it functional. But it does mean something important. What you trust is often not reality in its raw state. What you trust is reality after it has been formatted for you. That has always been the bargain. The sky instrument formats the heavens into something legible. The dashboard formats a system into something operable. The map formats space into something navigable. The panel formats process into something manageable. And human beings repeatedly accept that bargain because without it, complexity becomes difficult to live inside. That is why interfaces become powerful. They do not just show reality. They stage reality for use. And once reality is staged for use, it starts to feel more actionable, more coherent, and often more trustworthy than the raw world from which it came. That is the deeper continuity from astrolabes to dashboards. Not sameness of material, sameness of civilizational function. Take something larger than direct human scale. Compress it into signals. Give those signals visible order. Let a person act through them. That is ancient. That is modern. That is still happening. And if that sounds too abstract, think about how most people live now. They do not wait to feel the weather in full before trusting the day. They check the panel. They do not cross unfamiliar terrain by absorbing the land raw. They consult the map. They do not inspect an engine by taking it apart in motion. They glance at indicators. They do not comprehend entire systems directly. They rely on interfaces. That is not a failure of intelligence. That is the condition of living in complexity, which is why the ancient sky instrument matters so much. It shows us that this condition did not begin with digital life. It began much earlier, when human beings first realized that order could be cut, arranged, encoded, and carried. The brass changed to pixels. Engraved circles changed to glowing panels. Rotating arms changed to moving data layers. But the deeper pattern remained. Reality exceeds human scale. Pattern makes it less overwhelming. Form makes it easier to hold. An interface makes it usable. That is the long story. And once you see it, the modern world starts looking different. Dashboards stop feeling like neutral conveniences. They start looking like the latest stage in a very old project. The project of turning reality into something human beings can read quickly enough to act inside. That is what links the ancient sky tool to the modern interface world. Not nostalgia, not coincidence, a recurring civilizational need. And that leads to the deeper question. If humans have been building these kinds of interfaces for so long, why do we trust them so much? Why does a formatted world often feel more usable, more convincing, and sometimes even more real than the world in its raw, uncompressed state? That is where the next part of the story begins. Because the connection between ancient instruments and modern dashboards is only half the answer. The deeper answer is psychological. The deeper answer is about trust. And once you get there, the whole pattern becomes much harder to ignore. The materials changed. The pattern did not.